Well, hello everyone and good morning. My name is Heidi Holmes and I'm one of the co-founders of Mentorloop, and thank you for taking time out of your day today to join us for our webinar From Idea to Impact, how NIB runs their award-winning mentoring program. So I want to start today with an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Mentorloop acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get stuck into it. We do welcome questions, so please pop them in the chat. We're going to get through today's conversation and then at the end look to address those through a Q&A session. And post this webinar today, we will be sharing the recording and some useful resources. So look out for that in your inbox over the next day. So without further ado, I'd like to get stuck into the agenda. Today, we're going to be covering off, where to start and how to create a great mentoring program at your organisation. So as we all know, the importance of the why, we'll start with that. Moving on to kind of the mechanics of a program build. So, NIB will share today, some of the things they had to think about in getting started, and then the actual execution of that. And so how does Mentorloop come in and help an organisation get started with the tool itself? We'll look at some metrics and reporting as well. And then a big one is about continuity. So what's next? So if we're putting all this time and energy into starting an initiative, we want to make sure that there's a pathway for this to continue in a sustainable way. And then we'll get to questions. So next, I'd like to formally welcome my fellow panelists here today to today's session. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Andrew Corfield, who is the Talent and Capability Lead at NIB Group. So hello, Andrew.
Hey.
And we also have Kate Lloyd, who's a Learning and Organisational Development Advisor from NIB. So welcome, Kate.
Hi.
And also my colleague, Georgia Pascoe, who's Head of Customer Success here across APAC, who's been working closely with NIB to support them in their mentoring journey here. So welcome, Georgia.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you all. So let's get stuck into it. As Simon Sinek sort of made famous, it's all about the why. So I'm keen to kind of center today's discussion around starting with hearing from both yourself, Kate, or Andrew, jump in, around the why. What were the things that led to the decision really internally at NIB to start a mentoring program?
Yeah, so I think initially what I guess, moved us to start to look into a mentoring program was probably COVID had a big impact on our organisation. We moved to a distributed workforce. So we had people all across the country, across the world, and really we wanted to make sure that our people were still having those really meaningful connections. So something that's probably quite easy to do when everyone's in the office together, but becomes a little bit trickier when you've got that hybrid workforce and people are distributed across the country. So that was probably our catalyst to get moving in this direction. Also apart from the workforce, we're always looking for ideas, to get our people connected, engagement, those sorts of things as well. So that's probably the why. Then there becomes those other parts of things like feedback and, career progression and those sorts of things which come into play as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we heard a lot about that, I guess, at Mentorloop post-COVID. How do you create those water cooler moments that sometimes happened organically within an organisation? So I guess we hear this word formalize or non-formal mentoring, but why, I guess, was it important also for you guys to formalize this process in a more cohesive way?
Yeah. So I guess the feedback we had that, there was a need for mentoring. People wanted to be mentored, those relationships wanted to be set up, but where do people go? How do you find a mentor? How do you approach someone to be a mentor? And on the flip side, if you wanted to be a mentor, how do you find someone in the organisation to connect with as well? So one of the reasons we wanted to formalise the process was to make that process simple, give people the opportunity to be able to connect, especially across functions as well. It may be easy to connect with someone within your team or within a team that you work closely with, but across functions, it becomes a little bit more tricky. And, they're the types of relationships too, the loops that we want to set up between people as well, because there's, that diversity of thought as well that we really, we try to encourage within NIB as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that kind of leads us on to this next question I have, which is, I guess, you've established kind of the internal business case for the need and the want of mentoring. Sort of moving on to the how, I guess, how did you decide that a tool was going to be essential in moving to this next phase?
Yeah. So I guess once you implement a program like this, you want to be able to, monitor. We want to be able to make sure that people are really getting the most of the platform. So we wanted to be able to have the tools to be able to, assess, were we heading in the right direction? Were the right people being matched? What was the success rate of, our matches? Was it doing what we wanted it to do? So the platform, we wanted to formalise the platform. So we had those tools. We could make sure that, people are, setting goals and all of those things that, we want them to do using the platform, and all those things we want them to get out of mentoring as well. So it was really important that we had that formal tool for people to access and be able to use, and again, make it simple for people to be able to use that as well.
I think simple for the program coordinators as well. If you've ever tried to set something up or run something extensively like this, using Excel spreadsheets or anything like that, it gets messy very quickly. So definitely the dashboarding that's provided, I think, through Mentorloop is a huge testament to how successful the program can be.
And I think,
well, I guess, oh yeah, sorry, Georgia, you go.
I was going to say, if I think back to when we started this two years ago and setting it up with Louise, I remember one of the things also being we want to do these things, we want to increase connections across departments, and there's challenges with that a platform can help with, but then also just being able to scale it. And it is something that you have done over the last 2 years, taking it from a smaller program and really growing it and expanding it, and being able to do that, with software, it just means that actually going from 50 to 250 is a really easy process. There's not actually a lot more that's involved from your side. And I remember that definitely being one of the challenges that we were looking to overcome early on as well, was how do we start it and then be able to scale it easily?
Yeah, I think within that, and hearing some of the objectives early on about, the hybrid working and wanting to create these connections, particularly with, remote workers, we always say at Mentorloop, our job is about helping people find the unlikely connection, not necessarily the obvious connection. And, working with a lot of different customers, there's different reasons why people are running a program. And with that comes different match criteria and match methodology, some wanting to control it on their side or open it up to participants to self-match. So curious in that setup, and maybe Georgia, you can even talk to this. I mean, how did you guys decide about, yes, you've got this objective, but how do you want to, what is the match criteria for bringing people together? And then how do you execute on that in terms of some of the functionality around matching within Mentorloop?
Well, we're in the thick of matching for this year's cohort at the moment. So, Kate, did you want to go first and just speak to matching a little bit, and then I'll jump in at the end?
Yeah, so I think initially there's the different criteria for matching available. I think we use a combination of departments, goals and skills for our matching. So We do like, as I said, we do like that diversity of thought. So, you know, we're using different departments when they run the algorithm as well. But I think we also want, you know, some common goals, some common skills there to get the match right. So people, I guess, are on the same path as well. I don't know, Georgia, you might be able to add some in there because obviously you help us immensely with that process.
No, you covered most of it really. And I guess that's what's great is that it can be relatively simple in terms of what are our objectives, and yours really were increasing connections across different departments and different locations. So we take that into account, and then we also make sure we're looking that they have common goals and skills that they're looking to achieve. So that's our matching criteria at the moment. But of course, you know, if our objectives change, that's when we look to change what we're putting into the algorithm. But for this relaunch, that's what we're working with. Yeah.
And while that sounds really simple, I think you know, the way that the platform presents that information to you as the program coordinator is really the standout for me. Just being able to see a profile side by side, having the different pieces of information highlighted to you, you can quickly evaluate, you know, reasonably quickly whether that's going to be a good match or not. So it just streamlines that process and makes it very simple.
Yeah, we say with, you know, matching, it is about removing the bias in the process too and being very data driven, but, you know, being able to bring at the end of the day, you know, we're creating human connections here. So, you know, being able to have that flexibility to bring a people element into the side of it, I think is really useful too. I said questions at the end, but I'm seeing one come through here on the chat, which I thought we might as well address now while we're talking about matches. But the question is, have you had any bad matches? And understand that they're probably unavoidable in a big program, but how have you managed that as well?
Yeah, we've certainly had matches that where I guess it's not really compatibility, like it's just, and not a bad match, but matches that certainly haven't progressed. Is that how you would put it, Andrew?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's to do with, you go.
Might be wrong. Sorry, you jump in.
I was going to say, sometimes that's simply to do with time commitments. You know, sometimes in terms of, I think, what the mentee is expecting and what the mentor is willing to give, there's a bit of a mismatch or imbalance in those expectations. So I think they're unavoidable. It's nothing to really shy away from or really shirk at. I guess in how to manage them, probably just going directly to when you do get one of those is just trying to have that conversation and find out from, typically would start with the mentee, but also check in with the mentor as well, just finding out from the mentee, you know, what's happened here, what's the experience been like, and trying to, you know, get it from the mentee's experiential point of view as to where they feel like that mismatch or breakdown has occurred.
I agree. And I mean, I think we see that consistently across a lot of our programs. It's not necessarily a bad match. It's fallen over because they haven't heard from their mentee or their mentor, and we'll talk to, I guess, how the platform does help capture that, as opposed to if you're running with spreadsheets and you kind of lose visibility of what happens post-match. But I guess that's where a tool can help. So I'm keen to also move on to, I guess, a piece that happens outside of Mentorloop. And I think this is with any people initiative is often underestimated or sometimes missed, but the marketing and comms piece. So interested in hearing more about how you actually launch this to your people within the organisation and marketed it essentially as an internal people initiative.
Yeah, so we the strategy that we use is a cohort drive. So we take on the bulk of our sign-ups at the start of the year, and with that we have a really strong comms plan. We try to also match that to you know, other key initiatives that are going on within the business as well. So just recently we had International Women's Day. So we sent out some comms in conjunction with that as well, and we find that really helpful. They're going out group wide as well, but we also rely on like our participants to advocate for the program. You know, we have our, you know, internal like chats and intranet and things like that that we're posting to. We're trying to keep it front of mind with our employees as well. So, you know, another key factor we have is that I think the buy-in, we try to get our execs on board, our business partners as well, and they're speaking with teams and, you know, on a daily basis as well. And, you know, we try to utilise that form of communication as well, that informal communication, to get people involved.
Yeah, I think that key leadership buy-in is essential with any people initiative, but I find with mentoring, it's often something they can get behind because they understand it. They've benefited from it themselves. So that's awesome. So moving on to, I guess, the mechanics, you're in the thick of it. You've been running a program for a couple of years. You know, how do you run it? Like, what are you doing? Is it day to day? How much time are you spending on it? Keen to sort of start with that and then jump to sort of how Mentorloop, you know, in Georgia, being your mentoring specialist and account manager, has helped you in that journey too.
Yeah. So we, both Andrew and I are both program managers. So we're both on the platform. You know, we sort of work together, you know, looking after the admin side of it, those sorts of things. When we're doing a cohort drive, we're both working together. We're looking at matches. And those sorts of things. But then we also have our own roles, as in, you know, replying to sentiments and things like that. I don't think, you know, our time spent in the platform is excessive during the week. Like I was thinking about this, and, you know, we might spend, you know, an hour in the platform just taking a look at things, making sure everything's running smoothly, you know, having a look at the sentiments, the feedback, checking, you know, what our MQS is and things like that. There's a little bit more involved when we have a cohort, when we're driving that, because we're getting sign-ups where, you know, there's a little bit more
launch piece.
The launch piece, the comms to go out for that. We're working a little bit more closely, but once that's set up, I don't know, I would say maybe, you know, an hour a week we're in there just checking it out. So
pretty, I mean, for a program of its size, I think for us that's low upkeep, so that's also a plus, a major win. And I guess to give a little bit more perspective in terms of the time that we put into to launch a program, we've probably been planning this cohort since last November, and then, you know, we probably have more in-depth kind of planning sessions that range from an hour to 2 hours at a time, just in the lead up to launching a program. So a lot more work at the launch end, but once it's up and running, it's quite sustainable.
And Georgia, you'd be here to help along in the way?
Always here to help along the way. And I mean, I think even this one, so this is the second relaunch we've done with NIB. We did one the same time last year. And at that point, we made a few tweaks to the registration form because there were a few more things that we wanted to capture. But we haven't even needed to do that this time because we ultimately optimized it last year, and it's effectively more of a repeat process this year. But we are there to help at every point, and we review the program together every 4 to 6 weeks and just make sure things are tracking along well, and assess whether there's any changes we do need to make. But yes, you're right. Like, ultimately, there's a bit more work in a relaunch or a launch phase, but then once you've got it up and running and people are mentoring, it's really about monitoring the feedback you're getting from people and then using that to understand whether you need to intervene or whether actually everyone's pretty happy and you can let them keep going.
Yeah, and I don't think that would be sort of exclusive to a mentoring program either. I guess it's like any people initiative, you know, you've always got to be reminding people about these things that you're offering to them. So that's obviously a natural, a relaunch is a natural way to sort of get that marketing campaign up and running. So I guess, curious, obviously we've got these strategic reviews going, we're checking in, we might be optimizing the program. So there's an analytics piece I'm keen to unpack. And I know obviously within Mentorloop, we're tracking sort of every piece of thing that's going on, but I'm keen to understand from your side, like in a practical day-to-day, like what metrics are you looking at in the platform in order to, you know, with the hour check-in that you might be having each week, what are you zeroing in on to understand what you might need to action or you know, get enjoyment from?
Absolutely. Well, you know, it's once again testament to the dashboard that's provided for you, but I guess the first thing that we're looking at is just the participant section. So we've just got a breakdown of a ratio of how many people are mentors to mentees. And there's also an either role as well. So people can function in both roles. They can be a mentor and be a mentee at the same time. And it's really just a good way to get an overview of, I guess, the health of the program, the uptake of the program, how much interest there is for that. In terms of data, what that sort of informs for admin is just giving us a bit of an idea around where there might be opportunities to especially increase or find opportunities to try and increase our mentor base. We typically find, and I'm not sure if you'd be able to comment on this, Georgia, but with other programs as well, we tend to have a bit of a skew towards having more mentees. There's always more people wanting to be mentored in our program. So that's something that we know that we need to keep an eye on just from that quick little dashboard snapshot, is checking the health of that. Another one is the matching percentage. So we've got goals around that of a minimum of 70%. So we want to keep that above 70% just as a bit of a health check metric, just to make sure there's not people, you know, sitting in the system or sitting in the platform for a considerable length of time without having being matched. So that's a good way to do that. And then the milestone section is great for being able to just have an understanding of where people are at in their mentoring journey. I think particularly the thing that I like about this section is that it really drills down into the different stages of the progression in the relationship. And then it also has a little date count if somebody hasn't progressed past matching into that first meeting. So, you know, speaking to bad matches before, I think that's a really nice, easy way to be able to ascertain whether maybe that is a bad match. If there's not that communication happening between the two parties and it hasn't progressed to the first meeting, then that's probably something we might need to send a little prompt around or just check in around.
Nice. Well, I think you've sort of touched on this there, and I just wanted to bring up a slide because I think it sort of ties into, you know, the measurement piece. Obviously there's things in there around the quantitative, but also the qualitative, which come into play. And so looking at, I guess, the mentoring stories we help capture as well. I just thought I'd bring up a couple of your participants at NIB's stories here, but I guess, you know, we love seeing this come through from Mentorloop side. I'm sure it gives you some warm and fuzzies on your side too, but I appreciate this is probably powerful in the relaunch and marketing of your campaign and being able to help you share user stories. It comes back to, you know, you can't be what you can't see. So yeah, are these things that you also amplify in the organization?
Yeah, definitely. And shout out to Georgia and the work that you do with helping us with this as well. You know, being able to curate some of this stuff really makes it easy to be able to then use it as a future resource. So it is, even, as you can see here, just reading some of these, Drew and Matilda specifically, Drew was a huge advocate last year. So when I guess that's to say the benefit of that is when you've got these people that had a really good experience and then Mentorloop's able to capture that quite easily for you, and then just makes it that next step easier to be able to reach out to that person and I guess get them to be involved in either some future promotion or you know, we're running a workshop next week for the relaunch for our program, and we've got some past mentees that are now stepping into mentor roles for the first time. So just being able to
Nice.
yeah, just being able to kind of coordinate that involvement as well is really useful.
And I think, Andrew, you've just like touched on one of the things that we do look at as well. Like, you are correct. It's not, you isolated to your program, in that you can end up in a situation where you've got more mentees than mentors. But that once your program starts to mature a little bit, you do end up ultimately creating your pool of future mentors as the program grows, where you can encourage them to become the role of either, where they can be both, or transition into a role of being a mentor, which is fantastic. And if there is anyone who was wondering on, what other things that you can do if that is something that comes up, and there are things like, utilizing group loops, or certain mentors might have the capacity to mentor more than one person. So that also helps us in terms of managing those ratios if there is an imbalance. So yeah, and group loops isn't something that we've done on this program yet, but is something that we might explore over the next iteration.
Awesome, thank you. So I've got sort of a similar question for both of you, but I'm going to start with Kate or Andrew. Obviously, this has been a successful program. You've kind of, 2 years in now and just done another relaunch. So curious to hear from both of you. What do you think have been maybe the top 3 keys to the success of this program?
Oh, what do you think, Andrew? What do you
I'll jump
reckon?
in first.
Yeah.
I think, and you kind of touched on the beginning, I think, Kate, when you're talking about just the desire for mentoring within the organization. I think there's, having stepped into and sort of helping out with the program after it's already launched initially, just that drive and desire for mentoring in the organization just was really apparent. So there's an organic feel to that. And I think without that being there, if it was just, hey, an idea, let's put it in a mentoring program for mentoring's sake, I don't think it would have been as successful. I think the desire within the organization is really present for it, and that's really helped it to succeed. Because it's just enabled those relationships and partnerships to happen more naturally. I think the other thing, and this is testament to probably our business unit head and other people in leadership as well, but there is that buy-in from leadership, and that can't be understated how important that is. Even last week, I think there was a business unit head forum, and our business unit head was kind of out there spruiking, trying to get more buy-in from more senior leaders, because that's something that we're also finding as well, is that as the program matures and more people become aware of it and want to get involved, we are getting more senior leaders wanting mentors as well. So we're needing to start to, I guess, expand the pool of mentors from that perspective of we need more senior people in the business to start stepping into those roles as well. That's a good thing.
Awesome. And Georgia, obviously, NIB were one of our most impactful mentor program award winners last year. So I'm keen to hear from your side, given you're across lots of programs. What do you think are some of the highlights of how NIB have approached this in terms of building such a successful program?
Yeah, I think what you touched on, Andrew, is getting senior leadership buy-in, and that is really important when you are trying to build a true culture of mentoring. So I think that's something that NIB's done so well from the beginning. And then in terms of, it being a successful program, it started with under 100 participants, and so quickly grew to, I think we're at 270 now. And within that match rate, as you said, has always remained above 70, and your mentoring quality score has always remained above about a 4.3, 4.4, and that's out of 5. So that's very high. So the quality of mentoring that's happening, and the longevity of the program is really, really solid. So it's been so great to watch, and a big part of that, I think, is that, as you say, like, there's an appetite for it, but there is also leaders internally at NIB that are really advocating for participation too.
Awesome. So we're right on time here. I just want to finish off with one last question from me before we jump in and have allow 5 minutes for some Q&A. Future plans. What's next? Obviously, you're going through a relaunch now, but is there a vision of where you want to take this program in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're currently exploring, I guess, or actioning really, shouldn't say exploring, actioning two options with that. Kate, I'll let you speak to the future leaders one, but so I look after our graduate program as well. And we just really saw an easy opportunity to have some peer mentoring between the two different cohorts. So we've got a 2023 cohort and a 2024 cohort. So the 2023 cohort are acting as peer mentors for this incoming graduate cohort for 2024. And it's just a nice way to, once again, create a bit of interaction between those two cohorts. But also it makes a lot of logical sense. The older graduate cohort has been in that position as a graduate, so it makes a lot of sense to be able to have somebody mentoring you from that peer perspective. And Kate, I'll let you talk to the future leaders.
Yeah, so I guess the program's at a point now where we are getting, the business is coming to us as well about setting up mentoring. So we have some frontline teams that have come to us with mentors and mentees that they would like to be set up on the platform as well. So that's really good. It's part of their Future Leaders program. So they're using mentoring as part of their progression into leadership and using our platform to, build their mentoring and get those leadership skills throughout the business. So that's something new that we're just starting as well.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing your insights and learnings today. I really appreciate it. We've got a few questions that have come through on the chat, so we'll get to them. I'll start off with, it's sort of going back to the beginning a bit, but how did you actually get buy-in or the go-ahead from management and leaders? And I think you've kind of answered this next one, what kind of support you got from them, but mainly, how did you get that initial go-ahead to proceed with this?
Yeah, so I think initially our team, our people and culture team, saw a real need for it. So to start with, our business unit head was on board. So I think once you've got, your team is advocating for the program, then you can get others on board as well. So, so I think initially, because there was that need there, the buy-in sort of just come naturally from the rest of the business. They could see the benefits. As I said, it was sort of COVID had created, our business design where, it was hybrid and there was a real need for that connection there. So I think it sort of happened quite naturally together. Yeah.
We've also heard from customers in the past as well, like it's come up consistently in engagement survey that people want it. And so when you've got a data point, I guess that helps build that business case as well. So on the admin side and running it, question here, would you recommend that more people or a team run a mentoring program? And what might be the threshold that you need that additional support? So how many mentees and mentors, are you at now that there's sort of two admins? What's your thoughts on that?
Can I just say, Kate does a lot more than what she's admitting to, and she's worth her weight in gold. I'm really just a pretty face. Kate does a lot of the back end admin stuff, and I guess I help out with coordinating some of the more high end stuff, high level things. In terms of whether you'd need more than two admins, I think you would need a fairly large program before you start needing more than two people to be looking after something. And that's, once again, I can understand having come from running things where there's not a dedicated platform designed to be doing that, and how much hours that can consume. But the platform really does streamline things and makes it quite simple for me helping out every now and then with the back end to be able to run things with two people. So I don't know, Georgia, you might have more insight into this. I think you would need quite an extensive large cohort for more than two admins.
Yeah, I think so. It it also depends on your objectives for the program too. So I think you're right, Andrew. We actually do have some programs that are really, really large, you know, up to 1,000 people who ultimately have kind of one key program coordinator. But then we also have some that are around that size, but because there's different regions involved, there are some heads of different regions that are, you know, involved in some of the decision making and management of those particular people in their region. So it can vary, but from you know, just being able to manage and the amount of work that's involved, then yes, like it's often quite manageable with 1 to 2 people.
Great. We've got 2 more questions left, so I might jump into those and then we can wrap. So a question about recruiting mentors specifically. So someone here thought they might be in the same boat of having, you know, the demand on the mentee side, but how do you generate the same enthusiasm on the more senior mentor side?
Yeah, I think that's something that we rely a little bit more on linking in with, I guess in our instance, our business unit head to be able to generate that interest in those specific forums. You said a quote before, Heidi, I can't remember what it was, but it was a bit of a catchphrase about if something's not seen. And I think there's some truth to that in terms of generating that interest in those circles. I think it does need to come from somebody of that same level, from a peer of senior leadership, in order to be able to get people to buy into it. It's not going to happen just from group-wide comms going out. So I think that's important to keep in mind, is, you know, who is the sponsor of the program at that level, and coordinating something with them in order to be able to get that buy-in. Was there another part to the question?
No, I think that's kind of covered it off. And it's, I think my quote was, you can't be what you can't see. And I think that's where the mentoring stories help, you know, and it can create a bit of friendly pressure. Maybe if you see your colleagues that are at the same level participating and putting your hand up, you know, that can be kind of, you know, a gentle nudge to get more people to buy in. And I think what we see also with the mentoring stories is often mentors, regardless of their seniority, talk to the impact it's had for them. And so framing it for your mentors that this is not just a hierarchical relationship, the best mentoring relationships are reciprocal. I think leaders are more in tune with wanting to connect with other people in the business these days to understand what's happening at the coalface, to empathize with people that might be from different backgrounds, levels, you know, that DE&I lens that comes into it as well. So I think there's also a storyline here about the benefits for mentors that often can be missed because people think it's an altruistic move, and, you know, it's just, you know, they're the ones giving back, but actually they're often the ones that get more from the relationship as well. And I think this leads into another question we've got here about how do you actually get the mentors and mentees to share their stories. Agree, this can be great material, but it can be hard to get. So do you guys want to talk to your mentoring stories, or Georgia even?
I was just going to say, a lot of it actually happens relatively organically because of the way that Mentorloop's set up. We are checking in with participants and gathering feedback always over time. So we don't just survey at one point in time. After meetings that they have, they're prompted to leave feedback. And then also every 60 days, we send a check-in. How's it going with your mentor or mentee? And a lot of the feedback and the testimonials actually come from that commentary. For example, I rate this relationship 5 stars. This person has shown so much growth. It's been really great. And then you can just tap them on the shoulder. Are you happy for me to share that with the rest of the program? So there isn't actually much of an additional process in gathering that information. It kind of comes through naturally with the surveys that we send out.
I know
is that real feedback in the moment? Sorry, Andrew.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, I know that we're probably plugging pretty hard here, but Kate and I were actually talking about this just before we got on the call, and Georgia really is like another part of the team. I'm not sure we would feel like we've been able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish without having her kind of every step of the way. And, you know, from other, not going to name and shame here, but from other services or platforms, things that we've used in the past, sometimes you get that initial, you know, setup and that kind of maybe special treatment or pampering just because you're a new customer. And I think what's been really great in terms of this relationship with Mentorloop and specifically yourself, Georgia, is that you've continued that, and we've had regular meetings monthly just to check in and see how things are going and seeing how the program's developing, which is you just can't quite quantify how meaningful that is for us as program coordinators.
It's very nice to hear.
Yeah, and I do appreciate you calling that out, Andrew, because yeah, I think actually, you know, a lot of software out there is kind of, yeah, software as a service. We do wrap support around what we do, and so, you know, we're in the business of making human connections, so we absolutely want to build partnerships with our customers. So, you know, there's benefit for us staying in the loop here as well, because we hear feedback. It feeds into how we build out features in the product, how we can optimize things going forward. So it's beneficial for us to have a continuing conversation with our customers. So one last one to finish off with, because it's a big one, and then we'll wrap. But often leadership wants to see ROI on the dollar investment and tangible outcomes. So just curious to put like any key KPIs that you had around the program to begin with, and sort of understand at a point in time, how do we know has this been successful?
Yeah, it always comes up, right? ROI. I think it's starting to. The short answer is yes, but I also think what's important to call out is, you know, the impact of those relationships and being able to, I guess, once again, as to what we were saying before, weave in how those stories have made an impact in people's development. I think that's really a lens that we've tried to apply over this, is that sometimes it's really hard to get down to a figure number, and that the closest that we can get or can try to get to is measuring the impact of that individual personal development.
Nice. I think I've heard this quoted from a couple of customers before, but the single most cost-effective L&D strategy you can implement for your people. So there you go. There's the sell from me at the end. So look, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Kate and Andrew, for joining us today and sharing your insights. It's been, I've found it actually really interesting to hear this at the coalface. So thank you for taking time out of your busy days to share your stories. And also, Georgia, thank you for sharing your insights and supporting NIB in their journey. So thank you all.
Anytime. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining today. I hope you all have fantastic days. We'll follow up with those resources shortly, but otherwise, farewell for now. Cheers. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.